Drift, situated 46 kilometres southeast of Dundee, is the site of one of the most famous battles of the Anglo-Zulu War. The best-known drift through the Buffalo River, Rorke's Drift, was named after James Rorke, a ferryman who drowned in its waters and whose remains lie buried at the foot of a nearby hillside. A mission station was established by the Reverend Otto Witt of the Swedish Missionary Society, who built a small church, mission house and cattle kraal at the foot of a rocky mountain 1 kilometre west of Rorke's Drift. When Lord Chelmsford, the Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in Natal, invaded Zululand at Rorke's Drift on the 11th of January 1879, he encamped on the other side of the river, 16 kilometres to the east, at Isandlwana. Being so conveniently located close by, the Swedish mission was promptly converted into a supply depot and hospital. We're now going back to the 22nd of January 1879 and the British invasion of Zululand. B Company, 2nd Battalion, 24th Regiment of the Foot, was stationed at that out-of-the-way mission station called Rorke's Drift. This tiny force was left behind to look after the mission station, which had been taken over by the British. There were 2 officers in charge. They were Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers and Lieutenant Gonville Bronhead, who was in charge of the company. In the hospital were 36 men suffering from typhoid, dysentery and other odious diseases. The 140 men stationed at Rorke's Drift, 36 of whom were patients in the hospital, were about to be attacked by what was later estimated to be anything up to 4,000 or 5,000 Zulu warriors. It's difficult actually to figure out exactly how many Zulus arrived at Rorke's Drift, but elements of 4 regiments got there: the Iglovu, Ingondlo, Tulwana and Ingluyengwe. The Zulu attack started at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and continued for nearly 3 hours until about 6:45 p.m. The attack centred mainly around the hospital, where the British had set up a defence. The Zulus had already deployed into their bull's horns formation. Zulu tactics were generally to have mass rushes, fight ferociously for a couple of minutes, and then pull back for half to 3/4 of an hour to regroup. Most of the British casualties, 11 in all, occurred in the hospital, with only 4 occurring in the defence in front of the commissariat stores. For the first few hours, the fighting was intense. The Zulus advanced and were beaten off by the volley fire of the British. Men of Harlech, or the March of the Men of Harlech, is a song and military march that is traditionally said to describe events during the siege of Harlech Castle between 1461 and 1468. The garrison held out in what is the longest known siege in the history of the British Isles. Some associate the song with the earlier shorter siege of Harlech Castle around 1408, which pitted the forces of Owain Glyndŵr against the future Henry V of England. Popular belief has it that Men of Harlech was sung by the British troops during the battle at Rorke's Drift. Whether this is true or not really does not matter. The fact is that, in severe stress such as a battle, it is feasible that some singing may have taken place. So, for the license that the producer is invoking, the song sung was the Men of Harlech. At approximately 7 in the evening, somebody set fire to the thatched roof of the hospital, forcing the British defenders to withdraw until they got to the far end of the hospital. They could then heave the sick out of the rear window. They then faced a traverse of about 40 yards across a piece of ground to the next building. This was a storeroom with a redoubt full of sacks and biscuit tins. This was the last resort for the British. Those people who survived the earlier attacks and those who could still fight retired to the mealie bag biscuit tin redoubt, there to give their best before the Zulus came to finish them off. It's quite something to charge into the teeth of repeated British volley fire for hours on end, so the Zulus took time out throughout the battle to regain their morale and to get themselves going again. The British had then retired to the redoubt, their last line of defence. The attacks went on, according to the British, until about 3 a.m. on the 23rd, when the Zulus decided to give up and disappear. It is said that the British went through 27,000 rounds of ammunition at Rorke's Drift, and at the end of the battle had a box and a half left. That is about 900 rounds. So one more charge by the Zulus would have finished them off.